All right, welcome back. Let's quickly take the interview that I had with Moses Tule, who is the Director of Monetary Policy Department of the Central Bank of Nigeria, and Tokwe Fashua, the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics. We looked at the decisions, of course, of the MPC. Take a listen. Today we'll be looking at the decisions of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Don't forget that a two-day policy meeting was held here in Abuja where all the rates were kept steady. Of course, the MPR, which is the monetary policy rate, as the key benchmark rate, kept at 14%. The liquidity ratio at 30%. The cash reserve ratio kept also at 22.5%. Some Nigerians expected the MPC of the Central Bank of Nigeria to reduce rates, bearing in mind that the country is in a recession. And the loudest voice of all was, of course, from the finance minister. Even the morning of the final day of the MPC meeting did say, I'm seeking that the Central Bank of Nigeria should reduce interest rates. Joining me right now are two gentlemen. Mr. Moses Tule, to my far right, is the Director of Monetary Policy Department of the Central Bank of Nigeria. That's the department in charge of that, whenever once in 2 months, he works, very hard. You see him walking up and down. That's the man. He's on the hot seat today. Welcome, Mr. Tule, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Nancy.
All right, close to him is Tokwe Fashua, who is the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics. Mr. Fashua, good to see you. I've actually been told when you were coming into the studio, both of you, how can you do this thing, bringing the two of you on set? I haven't had this combination before, so I wonder what it will look like. Where should we start from? Mr. Tule, MPC rates, MPC kept rates steady across board, MPR 14%, like I said earlier on, cash reserve ratio 22.5%, liquidity ratio 30%, against the clamor that interest rate was going to be reduced. Why? I know I asked that question that day, though, but what exactly is the rationale behind that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nancy. I start by saying that macroeconomic policy decisions are not taken on the spur of the moment. They are not based on clamor or populist opinion. They are taken based on fundamentals and a thorough analysis of the contents of the data, and in breaking a way forward for the economy, you look holistically at all the issues taken together. And as you can see, the Monetary Policy Committee had the benefit of the data, analysis of global data, analysis of macroeconomic data, and of the financial data also. And you can see that they were convinced, based from the voting pattern, that all 10 members present and voting voted unanimously. And that's about the first time in the history of the MPC that all members will be convinced that about voting in the same direction. So first, it was based on fundamentals and not on populist opinion or on what expectations were. So and that's the beauty, and that is the beauty about the composition of the MPC.
Would I take that to mean that the MPC would not react if there's a need for a reaction? Not a reaction anyway, if there's a need for an action, like there's a need for an action right now. The country is in a recession, we're in dire straits right now, and we need action, especially from the monetary authority. So you're saying we don't react to what people are saying, or
maybe I'll put your question in perspective. Macroeconomic policy decision will not react to populist opinion. Macroeconomic policy decision would always react based on the data that is before the policymaker. That's the beginning. And secondly, we are not just in a recession. We've tried to explain this, that we are in a stagflation. First of all, if you recall, in July 2015, the MPC did give the red light. And look, the way things are going, the economy is heading towards a recession. And you would also recall that the press took up the governor of the central bank that, look, why would you be prophesying doom for the economy? But that was well-informed decision that was communicated to the Nigerian populace based on fundamentals. Now, the government thereafter released its budget, which we felt was sufficiently robust to stimulate the economy and reverse the trend of growth which the MPC saw and alerted the nation in July of last year. Now, unfortunately, the budget was presented to the National Assembly, and the process of passing the budget, we lost precious time. That time that was lost in the process provided impetus for the macroeconomic aggregates to dip further. So you see, it didn't start today. It didn't start in 2015. The foundation for where we are today started long before that time. We are only seeing the outcome of what we had planted based on poor policy decisions in the past. So to come at the eve of the MPC and suggest that the MPC should cut rates means there was no serious discussion with respect to the policy direction. If such a serious discussion had taken place at that level, there are channels of communication, and there is no way Nigerians would have got to know that that level of communication took place. It would have been privately carried out, and the relevant authorities would have been communicated to. But to provide that kind of platform for ventilating policy decisions or opinions in the public space, and then expecting that, an independent MPC would look at the data it has and then diverge from taking the decision that is right would be slightly difficult. And then secondly, we are looking at stagflation, where you are having growth deepening at the same time and inflation rising. And there's no quick fix in the stagflation. You must have to be very thorough in the policy prescriptions that you are putting in place.
Okay.
That's why I said it can't be taken from a populist point of view.
Mr. Fashola, what do you think? The economy is facing a stagflation. I think in the last 2 months or 3, I've been talking about stagflation here on the program, that what we're actually facing is not that inflation is even rising alone. Inflation is rising, growth is deepening, like you said, growth has weakened, and unemployment is rising. So it's a triple whammy. So it's a stagflation whether we like it or not. So it's something that we need to aggressively pursue, that Hydra-headed problem. What do you think? You've heard Mr. Tule. What exactly is your view after the 2-day policy meeting ended?
All right, thank you. Basically, I think what's going on is, the classic rivalry between monetary and fiscal policy, if you say it that way, but they could also complement each other on occasion. If we go back to what the Minister of Finance wanted, where she asked for interest rates to be reduced, perhaps pointedly, she was basically trying to put a lot of pressure on the monetary policy angle. However, the monetary policy in an economy like ours that's not too well structured, huge informal sector, how many people are even able to access loans in banks in the first place? And then you also look at the health of the banks. Are they really very eager to lend money out? So if you say, let's reduce interest rates, are people going to be rushing to the banks to get loans? Are they going to get the loans? But how much are you going to reduce the rates? Are we just then trying to put the responsibility back on the monetary authorities to say things are not going right because you haven't reduced interest rates, So there's a point in monetary policy where you run out of bullets. And then you will now have to look at the fiscal side. I personally, and I think I was here a couple of weeks back, and that's my belief. My position is that where we are now, it's clear that where we need to begin to shoot from is the fiscal end. And not only to just release money. Of course, the federal government, Minister of Finance, also said that they were releasing 350 billion into the system. That's about, using official rates, about $1 billion. But then you have to follow the money. Who are you paying these monies to? How does it percolate down the line? How do we ensure it actually does reboot the economy? Those are the issues. So fiscal monetary policy, you know, that's it. So the committee, 10 out of 10 decided to retain the rates. In my view, though I'm an outsider, in my view, I think that they just try to be cautious. Let us watch how things go. The reason why, well, I think so. Yeah, for now. Okay, now you have two issues. The key instrument of monetary policy at that level is the interest rate, the MPR, if you like. Of course, you can also use the CRR and all that to see how things balance out. I think they've tinkered with that for a bit now. But the core thing people were watching is what do they do with the MPR? Now, at this point, contrary to what Mr. Tule has said, for those of us on the street, I think, yes, I think public opinion does matter, even though they look strictly at the data. But you don't want to get into a scenario where people are really agitating and people are on the streets before you now take decisions. Therefore, they couldn't have increased it. If you want to slow down interest rates, the whole idea is to increase the interest. I mean, you slow down inflation, you increase the interest rate. At this point, it's politically incorrect and does not make a lot of sense to even dare to increase interest rates. So that's out of the card. If you want to reboot the economy, what you do is reduce interest rates. That's what the book said. That's what the textbook say. But if you reduce it, you have a chance of inflation running away, which is what the governor said. That look, we can't do that now because inflation will run away. The MPC members are very knowledgeable people, and they have tremendous amount of data at their disposal. The reason why when I did my research, the reason why the interest rate was increased to 14, MPR was increased to 14 at that point, contrary to public opinion, yes, was because they had the information that inflation was going to get as high as 20%. You know, and they said, oh, we can't afford to let that happen. And that was
when inflation was around 16%.
And of course, since then we've had 17.2, 17.7 or 6 thereabout. You know, and nobody knows what's going to happen. So, classic. For now, what we need to do is to look at the fiscal side, and it's not all about giving money to big contractors. You say, oh, you know. For two reasons. If you give money to a big construction firm, for example, let me not mention any name, chances are that the CFO is under pressure to remit money. They also are not very happy because now even if they get official funds, they're getting at 300 and thereabout, 320 thereabout. When actually maybe when they did the jobs, the rates were 190 or 160. So they're being owed for some of them for 2 years. And so the bottom line, they need their dollars. Even if the companies are owned by maybe some of the biggest shareholders are Nigerians, whatever dividend or whatever it is they pay out, at the top end of our economy, the rich people are also quite externalized. A lot of them are running dollar accounts. A lot of them have residencies and everything outside the country. So that's going to put the naira under even more pressure. So that's it. So they should watch that. They should follow the money. It's not just about saying we have released, because people are still complaining. In spite of all this, we are releasing money. People are still complaining. It's even a longer route to say what we need to do now is to make people borrow more money in the bank. All right. Of course, the other angle to also look at is that the federal government is trying to raise money through bonds, reducing those rates right now, depending on how radical they make it, may actually disincentivize those who are going to buy the government bonds. Government wants to raise money as well, you know. So there's a balancing act.
Mr. Tule, did the MPC actually run out of bullets? You know, did you actually...
May I get back, before I respond to your question, get back to this point and I repeat, macroeconomic policy decisions are not taken based on populist opinion. And let me give you one quick example. The central bank had held on to the exchange rate pretty long time, and we gave several explanations that what we needed was that reforms in the exchange rate market would be carried out only when the entire suite of policies, reform policies, are being carried out. That is when we can't isolate foreign exchange policy reforms. And there were prejudice and prejudice. you anchored several programs on this forum, calling on the central bank to liberalize the currency. When on 20th of June, we introduced the flexible foreign exchange market. What's happening to the Naira today? Who is bearing the brunt of the attack by Nigerians? It's the same central bank. When we head on to the Naira, who was attacking the central bank? The same Nigerians. The same people who came at your forum and other fora saying, release the Naira, release the Naira. The same people. We knew the right policy to do is to release the currency. But at what time were you going to do it? You can't do it standing alone as a standalone policy. We had to do it as a standalone policy, and you've seen the outcomes on the currency. So that is why I tell you, and I still tell you, I'm ready to defend it anywhere. You can't take macroeconomic policy decisions based on public opinion. It has to be based on the fundamentals and on the programs that you have in perspective. Now that is one. Now going to the issue whether monetary policy is running out of bullets. Let me say this. In 2015, from May of 2015 to the time when the cabinet was put in place, there was virtually no fiscal policy in this country. Monetary policy was virtually providing the direction for macroeconomic management. And for good, let's kindly just give that, recognize that monetary policy in this country has been doing what it is not designed to do in any country. There are limits to monetary policy. In the United States, monetary policy failed when interest rate got to 0.5%. At that level, a further reduction in interest rate was not going to do anything in terms of redirecting the flow of credit. And that is why they began to think outside the box, and they brought what you call unconventional monetary policy. It wasn't novel to the Fed. It's an idea that had been applied by the Bank of Japan some 10 years earlier. Only that it wasn't, they were not very aggressive about it, and so it wasn't quite of a success. But the Fed came out full blast with all the resources to pump into the market in very unconventional ways, and it made a difference. The Bank of England followed it. The European Central Bank did the same. So monetary policy can run out of ammunition. It always depends on the circumstance you are looking at it. A situation where you expect monetary policy to attract the inflow of foreign exchange when the economy is not producing, monetary policy is not designed to do that. A situation where you expect monetary policy to provide employment and job opportunities, monetary policy is not designed to do that. In a situation where you expect monetary policy to stimulate output, monetary policy is not designed to do that. All these are in the realm of fiscal policy. That is where fiscal policy begins. It is when the economy becomes saturated with resources and inflation is rising. Remember, the instruments available to monetary policy are extremely very few, very, very few. And monetary policy cannot act beyond the efficacy of those instruments. So we must understand where the work of a central bank begins and ends, and where the duty of the fiscal authorities led by the Ministry of Finance begins.
Mr. Tule, is there enough coordination between the Ministry of Finance and the central bank? I remember the summit we convened in May 26th of this year. You were a very vocal speaker at that summit, and why we decided we wanted to bring you, and not even, is that at that time, in May, I remember in my opening speech, I did say that we can get out of this economic coma if there seems to be coordination between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Even after singing that song, continuous singing of the hymn, I haven't seen any change. There seems not to be a coordination, because even when I asked the central bank governor the question at that press conference, that Madam Kemi Adeosun says reduce interest rate, you've gone ahead to retain it. Where is the coordination? Where is the synergy? Why are we seeing discordant tunes? You said it that day, that there should be a flow between the two authorities. What exactly is happening?
Can I repeat what I said at that meeting, the 20th anniversary of...
On the 26th of May, that's the 10th at least. Yes.
Anniversary
yes.
of... What we said on that day was that traditionally, just like Dr. Fashua made reference to, there is always this tussle between monetary policy and traditionally, and that what other countries have gone to compel coordination was to pass legislation. So an act of the National Assembly that compels the monetary authorities to sit at the same table either every quarter with the fiscal authorities and plan out and harmonize their direction. That does not mean monetary policy will not act when price stability is threatened, but that there is substantial, very high level of coordination compared by statute. That was what we put forward. Now, to say whether there's monetary or fiscal policy coordination or not, I can't tell you.
Are you trying
yes
to be
or no.
safe?
Because
not correct?
No, not being politically correct. You know that there's a meeting of the Economic Management Committee
team, I know that.
team every week, and that the governor of the central bank is there, and the Minister of Finance is also there. So there are always discussions going on between them at that level. But what we are saying, that when you talk about monetary and fiscal policy coordination, you expect deeper coordination, such that if the Honorable Minister of Finance had to make a suggestion to the central bank on the eve of the MPC, definitely there are routes to which those things are done, and those views could be very well received, and the committee members could also look at it. But again, it's got to be based on the fundamentals and on the data. Let me make a distinction between stagflation and recession. In a recession, a country can spend its way out of a recession because you are dealing with one aggregate that is wrong, that has got something change, something is gone wrong in the head. That is growth.
Economic growth.
Spending by the government would take the country out of that, but it's got to be over time. There's no quick fix even in a recession. Remember, Japan, it's taking them 10 years. The EU, the entire EU economies, since 2008, when the global financial crisis ended, they are still in recession. They've not been able to get out of it, and that's a recession. That's not a stagflation. In a stagflation, whatever policy option you take, you are working on a very tight rope because it could backfire. If the fiscal authorities decide to spend and spend and spend, inflation would go up. Remember Germany in the 1940s. Remember Zimbabwe today, where in fact, remember Venezuela. Inflation is over 1,000%. Is that what we want? So the fiscal authorities can just go ahead spending and spending and spending. And of course, you must deal with inflation. So that is the spending aspect of it. If you are the monetary authorities and say, look, we are only concerned with price stability. We are going to stabilize prices. We must target inflation without looking at other things. You will squeeze the economy out of existence, and then you're going to have negative growth. That is why there are no quick fixes in a stagflation. The policy menu has to be well thought out and very well planned.
Is it time for us to do unconventional monetary policy, just like you said? Because with your own analysis now, we are working on a tightrope. The government wants to go all the way Keynesian. Spend your way out of recession. There's inflation. Unemployment is rising. So where do we go from here? Unconventional policy?
You just need to coordinate the policies properly. Unconventional policy, what aspect of unconventional policy? What aspect of it? Because the unconventional policy adopted by the Fed at that time
yes,
was to think outside the box and say, look, the central bank should get into the market and buy and
Do
buy
quantitative
instruments and release money into the market so that there could be liquidity, because the market did not have liquidity. At that time, there was no liquidity. Where we are talking here now and now, there is a lot of liquidity in this system, but the banking system is not lending. Because since we are in a recession, there are risks. Real interest rates are negative. It is not the central bank that caused real interest rates to be negative. It is not this present government that has caused real interest rates to be negative. There's a foundation to where we are. But the combination of policy reforms and structural rigidities in the economy have led inflation to where we are, which is what has led real interest rates to be negative. Are we prepared to have interest rate at 26%? But that's Ghana. So when people come at your show, they begin to talk to us and make reference that, look, in Ghana things are going and businesses are moving.
26%.
Yes, of course, NPR.
Yeah. NPR,
policy
yes.
rate is 26%.
Yes.
Are we prepared to have policy rate at that level? So you see, we have to really be very conscious of the policy suggestions we are making, because the way out is not a quick fix. It's going to be comprehensive coordination of all macroeconomic policies. And it's got to be at the technical level, and the highest level has to buy in to what the inputs are going to be and what the outcomes are going to be.
Mr. Fashoa.
Is there any more to add to that?
You know, because it seems when Mr. Tule was explaining, I guess for those that are watching that may not even know the job or the duties of a central bank, primarily is price stability, whether you like it or not. But even in our country, so to speak, the central bank has been overstretched. Yeah. I remember, just like he said, before the president even chose his cabinet, the central bank, and people like us then were saying, Mr. President, choose a cabinet. That there's a cost of delay, and there's a cost of your body language. Nobody listens to people like us, you know. And now we are actually suffering it. That time was wasted at the end of the day. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here?
Well. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough call, a very tough call. You are aware of my own little efforts in this area and some of the out-of-the-box things that I've suggested. In fact, I think some economists were invited last week to the Federal Executive
Council, yes.
And some of them gave some out-of-the-box ideas. I think I saw a couple of them. One was actually asking for creating another AMCON, to dump some more toxic.
Exactly.
And I think someone was asking for some other arcane stuff like that. I think the real
said we should sell our assets.
Which is another thing people are floating. I don't even believe that our core problem is the liquidity. You know, like Mr. Tule has just said, you know, it's you know, there's liquidity in the system. I mean, with the banks, and they are not lending because you know, for one reason or the other. So I don't believe in that fire sale. We also have to be very careful when you are in a very difficult situation. You can't sell your assets at a good premium. Yeah. You're going to be selling at huge discounts, and by the time you finish spending the money, what's going to happen? Some of the guys that are asking for these asset sales are also the ones who...
They are capitalists.
Capitalists, they have an idea to purchase, well, you know, to purchase...
But we know what capitalists are all over the world, Mr.
Exactly,
Fashoa.
Okay, I agree. Yeah. You know, but, you know, these guys also have a view to purchasing those assets.
Thing at this time?
And then there's also the pitch to get the pension funds. So, so it's just a case of we have two things going for us. Maybe NLNG on one part. Mind you, this NLNG actually was able to loan money to government out of the blues at the beginning of this regime. We never knew that they had so much liquidity. I didn't know anyway, but I mean, these guys seem to be fairly well run. Nigeria owns 35% of LNG. The rest belongs, 35 or 36%. The rest belongs to all the JV partners. So it's not just ours. If we want to get out now, we need to be extremely careful. If we have a company that we're running pretty well, we need to be extremely careful of what we're just selling out. We need to also be careful emptying out our pension, because the pension fund still has a big hole in it. It's not enough. So not even in the name of so-called infrastructure. And I think this morning I was reading some stuff, and you know, even when there was a time we spent a lot on infrastructure in this country, in the Gowon days after the Civil War, huge amounts. And then even a lot of those spending was not optimal as at then. we need to be extremely careful about the policy decisions that we're taking. But I think that the real issue is that we've always focused too much on financial markets in Nigeria. I took something very important from what Mr. Sule just said, in terms of the fiscal policies themselves. If you need to be careful how much you spend, because it's not just a case of rushing to the town, say we want to spend, we want to release money, and then you're releasing money, and then at the end of the day you lose control of inflation. If we're in the stagflation, meaning the stagnant economy, that people are not producing and inflation is running away, it's a double jeopardy, perhaps triple jeopardy. It's one of those things that they call trilemmas and quadrilemmas in the monetary policy field and so on. So it seems like even the fiscal policy, we need to be careful about it. Like I said earlier, it's about following the money. Now, out of the box idea, my own out of the box idea remains the same. To probably look, if you have an eagle-eye view of the economy, you would see that, number one, we have a productivity problem. That 170 million Nigerians, maybe if 130 million out of that are supposed to be working, 120, 100 million of that are supposed to be working age. And now I'm talking of the real problem we have is between people between the ages of 14 and 25. In every country around the world that's working, go to Europe, go to the Americas and so on, go to Japan, China, even from that age, people begin to be productive. But in this part of the world, we have kind of neglected those people. And every time we talk about graduate unemployment, and I always say that the moment you start thinking of graduate, you've already missed the bus. Because you don't have to first train people and send them to university, and then when they come out in that style, oh, what do they do? You should be able to create employment for people before that level. We should be able to create employment for people at secondary school level. I was in a forum yesterday, I think it's called Nigeria Rebirth Forum, which I also re-echoed this issue to the extent that we need to harness the energy of the youth. We need to harness the energy of the youth. We need to create some. Now, everybody will say the youth should go and do entrepreneurship. I believe so, but I think we should meet somewhere in the middle. The government also needs to incentivize this entrepreneurship drive, not only by selective approach. We are at a point, we're at a crisis point where you have to do the extraordinary. So the government needs to meet them at some point, and the government needs to think of putting money in the pockets of the youth. Now, what is this going to do? If you can put money in the pockets of the youth, if we can actually focus on ages 14 to 25, right? Secondary school dropouts, secondary school leavers, even those who are still in secondary school, the way it used to be in Nigeria. If you can create jobs at that point, then you have created jobs for the graduates, because the graduates are going to be the supervisors of those ones. So this economy, if we cannot only look at fiscal policy from the point of just releasing money into the economy. We cannot also look at monetary policy in terms of just tinkering with interest rates. Now you're looking at social policy. Do we know ourselves? What's the demographics? Where are the numbers? What do we need to do with these numbers? You see that some kind of crazy crimes are happening recently. Somewhere in Lagos recently, they went, landlords jogging in the money they just packed for them. They're asking for 1.2 billion. A lot of crazy things are going on. One guy went and opened an account and created BVN and everything in the name of Father Kuka. And he duped people for 5.7 million. According to what one Mr. Dele Shobowale wrote in Vanguard, that look, yes, that every recession creates jobs. It's just that it's not the kind of job that government wants. Yeah. Exactly. So there's a lot of crime going on. So we need to, I don't know if we would actually have that opportunity again, but like you said, I was here, you were here. We begged and begged that some of these things be done. And we actually lost the time. I don't know how we're going to get it back, but it's a combination of social policies, and then the monetary people are doing theirs, and the fiscal guys, and when the fiscal guys do theirs, they must follow it. And the politicians. A state which can pay salaries, I'm sorry, actually went and used $12.1 million to buy cars for executives. At an average of 109 cars, that's $111,000 per SUV. That is 47.1 million naira for one. So listen, when you listen to things like that, say no, I don't think we are ready. We don't want it to. This is the way we want it to be, so let it be.
I wish we could continue, but I think we've laid the fundamentals that we actually want to lay, and actually very good thoughts, because I remember, and I've always said it, when America was in a recession before President Obama came, there was a plan. And it took President Obama with the Congress of America 30 days to set up stuff. And I've said it on the show. Anyway, I don't need to say it again because it will be sounding like a broken record or like an attack on the government or whatever. But even before the government came in, we're saying, where do we go from here? Anyway, like I said at the beginning of the program, we'll continue to debate. We'll continue to seek for solutions till we get a way out. Just before we wrap up today's show, let's quickly take you through or how the central bank governor answered the question as to the reduction of interest rates. I asked him that question on Tuesday. And take a listen to what he said. All right, we are sorry for that. We couldn't come up with it. I'll bring it up subsequently. But just before we go, let me just take a few tweets coming in. Sam Diala says, the call by the finance minister for interest rate reduction was most embarrassing. Please, let's listen to Mr. Tule. All right, David Okeji says, the government is indirectly trying to shift blame for their failure and drought of ideas in managing the economy on Central Bank of Nigeria. Anyway, that's the much I can take. But I think at this point we should all work together, the fiscal authority, the monetary authorities, experts, and all of that to get out of this recession. We should continue to have, constructive debate as well as actions and solutions. Perhaps we know what to do, but we should begin to do that, to harness the energy that we really have in this country. All right, that's the much we can take on today's edition of the program. Many thanks for joining us. Thank you for your tweets. Be the best you can be. Be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Ilo. God bless Nigeria. Bye now.